Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Norm and Katie's Legal Fight Club. Katie, what's our motto here?
Well, normally what happens in Fight Club stays in Fight Club, but here at Legal Fight Club, we bring you all of the insight, all of the analysis, all of the inside baseball so that you can take that information and spread it far and wide. And Norm, today we are here to talk about one of your favorite topics. It's technically called the Supreme Court of the United States, but you have a better name for it.
I call it the Supreme MAGA Tribunal because they so often fail us. But, friends, today we're going to give you an overview of some of the main cases, and we're going to talk about the secret formula, Donald Trump's kryptonite at the Supreme Court of the United States. And you have made it possible for that case to exist. So, Katie, let's start in the beginning. There's a big case at SCOTUS today before we get to that bombshell, and that is the slaughter case. The MAGA Supreme Tribunal is going to slaughter independent agencies in the federal government, and they're going to slaughter affordability for all Americans. Before we talk about how we're going to deal with this issue and how the other case that we have where we think we're going to win, Katie, what is going on in that slaughter case?
Well, it's yet another push by Donald Trump to push the outer limits of how we defined what the executive is allowed to do. And in this instance, Trump just fired a member of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And Rebecca Slaughter is the name of the commissioner who had been appointed by former President Biden to serve on the FTC. And the idea, Norm, is it possible for the executive to exercise this type of authority to just summarily fire somebody who is in an independent commission like the FTC? I mean, look, Norm, this putting aside whether Trump understands how trade works in the first place. We've seen how he works vis-a-vis the tariffs, but the tariffs are kind of relevant here too, right? I mean, we have to be able to see that certain organizations and entities have the independence to run themselves without undue political influence. This idea of stacking agencies or commissions that are incredibly important for all Americans with just insiders or loyalists or people that are yes men or yes women. And so the Supreme Court of the United States is hearing oral arguments today, and John Sauer, who a lot of us know, Norm, the guy who said that it was okay for a president to dispatch SEAL Team 6 to assassinate political opponents because, you know, when you're the president, you can do whatever the hell you want to do, is now saying the same thing today to SCOTUS.
And here's why it matters if Donald Trump claims the illegal authority to fire the head of the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC and other independent agencies in the federal government are there as consumer watchdogs, among other things. A president should not be able to tamper with them. Donald Trump, for example, has destroyed affordability in our country. The latest thing, he's taken money away from your and my health care, and he's given that money as tax breaks to billionaires, make healthcare more expensive for the rest of us. He's in cahoots with the companies. Well, guess what? If the companies in this federal trade can buy Donald Trump off by making a large contribution to the ballroom, who pays? You do. And the FTC, as an independent agency, could push back on that. Donald Trump is trying to tear that down. He wants control. It means things are going to be much more expensive for you. That's why the American people are so upset with him. And unfortunately, we'll see what happens at the Supreme MAGA Tribunal. Unfortunately, it looks like they're going to tear that down. But the good news is that's not the only case that the Supreme Court has. And there are several other cases. Next up, Katie, say a word about the tariffs case, because we think that's another place where Donald Trump has made things much more expensive for you and me, Katie, for all Americans. But maybe he's going to get some Supreme Court pushback.
Yeah, so it's another idea that the executive, like the president of the United States, who has absolutely no business meddling in this particular issue, his introduction of words into federal statutes and the idea that he can just summarily decide that he wants to increase tariffs even though he doesn't have the right to be able to do so. The Supreme Court of the United States is weighing whether or not that is something that the president of the United States can do. And, Norm, it kind of fits thematically with what we're seeing here, not only with the Slaughter case with the FTC, but the tariffs case. And then we also have Trump versus Illinois, the federalization of the National Guard and people and troops to be able to go into the American cities. This is, again, the exercise of the executive branch flexing, seeing how far the executive branch can move its power to be able to invade other spheres of control and other branches of government.
And in addition to Trump possibly lining up to lose on the tariffs case, which will be a big sigh of relief to all Americans, because the tariffs are just a consumer tax. It's why everything is so much
Pass
more
it along
expensive.
to
It's
the
why the
consumer.
Americans are fed up, Katie. And they don't want the National Guard in our streets, either in our cities. That is not something the American people are interested in. There's no invasion in the streets of our cities that has I'm not seeing any Venezuelan tanks. That doesn't justify deploying our American military in our cities. Then we come to another big Supreme Court case, and this is the one we wanted to talk to you about most of all, and that is the Birthright citizenship case. Because when you are a paid subscriber to The Contrarian, you support our role. We've been active across all litigation fronts at Democracy Defenders Fund, more than 225 matters.
Amazing.
Katie, tell the people about the Birthright citizenship case to bring us home on this episode of our Legal Fight Club.
Well, this is a case that Democracy Defenders Fund has been working as lawyers, as co-counsel with the ACLU and others to be able to make sure that Donald Trump's executive order that he signed on day one of his presidency the second time around, this idea that there's no such thing as birthright citizenship, that the 14th Amendment just doesn't have any teeth, Norm, and it just doesn't exist. This case is important because the lower courts have found what? That Trump can't be doing this. And so, Norm, I actually kind of want to turn this back on its head a little bit and go back to you for a second, because I think, Norm, that this case is being taken up by the Supreme Court, even with the uber conservative six, to be able to send a message to Donald Trump that says, listen, man, there's certain things you cannot meddle with, and there's certain things you cannot do. Do you think it actually sends a big signal? Either way, I guess, Norm, that the Supreme Court agreed to take up this case.
Well, Donald Trump claiming that he, not the Constitution, not the laws, not the practice in the United States all these centuries, not the decisions of the Supreme Court, but he, Donald Trump, gets to choose, Katie, which babies born here are citizens and which not. No, that is not the law. And all indications are that the Supreme Court has taken this case in order to put a brake on Donald Trump's run-amok assault on the 14th Amendment. We'll see what happens. You can never predict for sure. And certainly we've had some disappointments from the court. But we don't think, Katie and I and most commentators do not think that the court has taken this case to end the 14th Amendment. So in that regard, Donald Trump, like with the tariffs, like with perhaps deploying the National Guard, perhaps with the tariffs, very tough questions at oral argument, we think this birthright citizenship case is going to be kryptonite for Donald Trump up at the Supreme Court. And we think it's very important because it shows that the court, just like everyone in the country, is saying, hey, Donald Trump, you went too far. And of course, we're very pleased and proud, Katie and I and our Democracy Defenders Fund colleagues, to be a part of advancing this case, protecting the babies, all babies born here, their parents, their families, assuring them that this core American principle, if you're born here, you are a U.S. citizen, remains firmly in place. Katie, last word over to you.
I just think it's important, Norm, to just underscore that sometimes the messages have to be sent from courts like the Supreme Court, right? Like sometimes these are the cases that, look, you don't have to take these cases. Nobody's forcing the Supreme Court to take these cases. But in this instance, these are the types of cases that when they are taken up by SCOTUS, and SCOTUS does rule as and in defense of the rule of law, Norm, these are the messages that are resounding and hopefully are being heard. My only concern, Norm, is the following. We have had district court judges that have been working tirelessly, that have been really taking up the laboring oar of making sure that the norms and institutions and the rule of law is defended, some appellate court judges as well. And then we have the Supreme Court that steps in and says, oh, sorry, y'all doing all that hard work, we're going to make it all topsy-turvy and not be consistent. And so that's my only concern about SCOTUS. But in this instance, the 14th Amendment gives me some reassurance that it'll help them and it'll protect people like the clients of DDF and others that, like you say, are just the babies that have no control, right, Norm? They have no control over these things, and they're being born, and they should be recognized, and they must be recognized as U.S. citizens.
Well, there you have it, friends. Some challenging times, including we analyze probably going to be pretty tough in this Slaughter case, but also some promising signs ahead. And you're a part of that, particularly in the Birthright citizenship case, where we feel cautiously optimistic about the way ahead. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Norm and Katie's Legal Fight Club here on the Contrarian YouTube channel. And remember, when you're a paid subscriber to the Contrarian, you support all that pro-democracy litigation. So you're not just watching Fight Club, you're in Fight Club, fighting for the Constitution, the American idea, and for our democracy. See you next time.